I'm speaking to you from, we call the Bhikkhu Vihara. So this is a building that the bhikkhus use. We have laundry room and sewing area and washrooms, showers, all that kind of thing, library. And before we started this evening, I was doing some, because there's quite a long passage. It's quite a lovely area. There are some niches where there are various Buddha rupas, and I brought a little gold-plated Maitreya, I think, that was offered to me just before I left Thailand, and so it's in there. And anyway, these little niches have their little lights. It's all very very pleasant, quite a beautifully designed space. So I was doing, it's a long space hallway. So I was doing some walking meditation in there, and passed a monk and sort of joked with him. I said, "Yeah, what should I talk today? What should I talk about today, Venerable?" And he said, "Oh, that's always the question, isn't it, Ajahn?" Yes, it's always the question. I've been listening to some Dhamma talks on YouTube the last week or so, and I always admire monks who seem to have a series of themes that they like to cover. And I think, I mean, for some of these monks, they actually have YouTube channels, so obviously they put quite a bit of energy into covering topics and over time covering a spectrum, a range of topics which nest together, obviously, and in their particular ways of approaches to the Dhamma. And then there are talks like these, and then I was listening to one or two other talks like this. Just one for the talks on the moon cycle, for instance, to the monastics and lay people, and they tend to be somewhat more rambling, casual, but picking up the themes of the day, which may be pertinent to that community and that sort of thing. But since we're a virtual community and you don't share this space, and I'm not in your living rooms or kitchens, so I don't know much about or anything about your spaces. So I've got to kind of make up things, don't I? So that presents different challenges to this mind, sometimes it's been worrisome. I know Lumpur Viradamo talks about this kind of thing, how, there was a time, obviously years ago, when he'd be quite nervous before giving a talk, self-conscious, younger man, and hadn't done it much. And then after you sort of come to the same door and knock on it and turn the knob and enter it, after you've done that a few thousand times, I guess, the procedure becomes more familiar to you. Nevertheless, taken as a practice, it is an interesting one to watch the mind. And I'm sure you all have similar things in your lives where maybe if you're busy in your working lives, sometimes you might have to make presentations, for example, or you're calling up a friend because there's something of a delicate nature you need to bring up, and you're hoping you can approach it in a delicate way, but which is truthful and raises maybe something important between you that ought to be fleshed out a bit, and you recognize it might be difficult for that person, so there might be some nervousness, some self-consciousness preceding that kind of event. So we all face these kinds of things, even just bringing something to the attention of a child or your parent or whatever, just speech itself, when it has a kind of formal component, when you recognize that more attention, alertness needs to be brought to bear so that you can collect your mind a bit, then it raises different things for this. And sometimes the approach to that is to basically memorize something, or to write down a list of topics, one after the other in an orderly and neat fashion that you want to make sure you cover. And then sometimes that works, and sometimes you forget you are on your list, and you start jumbling around and getting yourself more confused. So we're all works in progress, aren't we? So the monastery here is, I guess this is not unusual. It's opening up more and more. So we've had some. I walked into the meal. The meal at a monastery is the kind of set piece of the day, if there is such a thing. So quite often people will come to offer a meal, and then they stay and eat it with us usually. And they'll come in, of course, and share a little bit with the community, and then the monks will chant blessings, and so they'll receive that kind of those auspicious blessings, and it's just part of the occasion. And just this week, actually, I opened the door into this very familiar space, but all of a sudden there are about 20 people there, and you have to know that in the last, since being here, really, quite often it's just the community, or one visitor or 3 visitors, but now there are 20. And one of them was a good friend, Stan from BC. He hadn't told me he was coming. We actually confer from time to time on email, not that infrequently really, but he hadn't thought to tell me he was coming. And then there's a couple of that I knew from Calgary, but years before had moved to Montreal. And so they came, and they didn't, and usually they just basically come to see me. And they didn't tell me either. So all of a sudden there's a room full of people, and 3 of them I know very well. And my goodness. So it doesn't take much to get me kind of excited and flustered, as you can see. So I was quite interested in seeing all of that. And with Lumpur Dhamma way, it's me that's kind of the master of ceremonies, as it were. So Lumpur Cha said that junior monks have junior monk dukkha, and monks in their middle years have the dukkha of monks in their middle years, and senior monks have senior monks dukkha, and abbots have abbots dukkha, and so on. So it just follows you around like a bad pair of old pair of socks. But you get used to it to some degree. In thinking about some themes around practice, they've come up in Lumpur Dhamma's reflections from time to time lately, and basically they reflect his way of teaching, and his way of teaching very much reflects Lumpur Sumedho's, because they were together for many years, and Lumpur Sumedho has had a big and benign influence on Lumpur Dhamma's life as a monastic, and just his life in general. And this has to do with this very simple approach, very direct approach to practice, and not just formal practice, not just sitting on that cushion, with your legs in this position, but also the practice of walking to the toilet, and eating your meal, and cleaning your kuti, and fumbling around in the wood shop and trying to find a better piece of maple to make something with, and just doing whatever you do during the day, having that conversation with your colleagues or your spouse or what have you. And it begins with the simplest of observations, and it's just one of these approaches to experiences, which is has a kind of irrefutable quality, which is whatever is happening right now, right here now, whatever you're aware of in your body, in your mind, your emotional state, things that are coming up in memory, which are disturbing or delighting, whatever you've just noticed in the trees opposite to you in the forest, whatever it is, it's like this. It's like this. So when Lumpur Viradhammo mentions this often, and of course, when Lumpur Sumedho was here, his talks always revolve in one way or another on this theme. And it's this reminder that, in my experience, just never gets old. It always brings a kind of freshness to experience, to remind oneself that the present moment is just like this. It can't be any other way. Even when we, of course, if I'm in an angry state and I'm, resentful about something someone said, or regretting something I said, or whatever it is, and however I wish it were otherwise, right now, it's just like this. It's exactly like it is. That's all it is. That's all it can be. And this is the miracle of mindfulness. And when we realize, when we acknowledge exactly the way the moment is in this moment, it begins to change, because it can't stay the same. So the truths of Buddhism begin to flower simply by noticing what's occurring in the moment. As I say, it has this beautiful kind of irrefutable quality. Oh, yeah, this is it. It prevents all of the needless proliferation which occurs. Some of it, very often, all of it perhaps, very habitual. Something is irritating and you get irritated, okay? That's what we say. Something is delightful and you become delighted. Something is confusing and it just makes you more confused. The mind spins in those directions. It's like the pool ball on the table that you hit it. If you don't hit it in the dead center, you put a bit of spin on it. And the spin of the cue ball then transfers into the ball it hits, and it spins in the opposite direction. And before you know it, you've got things going in every direction, bounding off of the side of the. For those of you who've played any pool in your life, I don't sure how many of you have. But remembering that this moment is just like this, it's like this. Has this very healthy, simple quality to it, as I say, which, and you're not reminding yourself, oh, I must be present. What is it? Okay, where's my breath? Where's my breath? Or I have to feel my feet on the floor, or whatever. There isn't this kind of. It doesn't come along with an instruction manual. Rather, it's like a little piece of poetry or something. It's like this. Oh, look. Oh, look. Or, oh, listen. Very, very simple. So it reminds me, actually, I had a teacher, a wonderful Sri Lankan monk. He might be the first monk I ever spent much time with. His name was Venerable Punyaji, and maybe Chinta in Australia knows Venerable Punyaji, Sri Lankan monk.
I think Ajahn, he lived in Singapore or Malaysia.
He did, yeah. He lived a lot in Malaysia. He would spend rains in Malaysia quite often. He came to Canada for many years, like once a year, we'll say, spent a few months here. Did some writing here, and I attended several retreats. And then when I was doing some of my academic work, I would come and have long chats with him. And he was a very brilliant very brilliant monk. I mean, people describe him as a kind of genius. Thoroughly understood Pali, as so many Sri Lankan monks do, but such an engaging person, and he wouldn't let a single idea or a single word in Pali scriptures go by without putting it to this test of discernment and looking at its etymology and trying to make sense of the Buddha's phraseology and his similes and what the teachings meant in that. And anyway, I from time to time, he passed away a few years ago, and I felt so fortunate at having spent, I guess it was at the end of my first year in Thailand, actually, after I'd been for about half of the year in a very remote kind of hermitage, some of the time by myself, and for the rest of it, almost the rest of the time with just one other monk on, in the midst of basically tens of thousands of acres. I think we were 2 hours away on a motorbike to the nearest Burmese village that comprised 10 families. I mean, it was really remote. Anyway, just got out of that and got on a plane to Kuala Lumpur, and this is after the rains that year, and Venerable Puniji was still at Brickfields, very, very famous temple in Kuala Lumpur, and I was able to spend, I guess, 3 nights there, and we're just discussing. I was going over one of his books and giving him ideas about just editing some of his English, really. And but that was an opportunity to sit and chat and just enter that sphere of erudition and insight too, because he was definitely a practicing monk. And so one of the things that I remember, and this brings us basically to the rudiments, say, of the Eightfold Path, and we think of Sila, Samadhi, Panya, right? Virtue, concentration, wisdom, or virtue, collectedness, mental stability, we'll say, but concentration is usually the word for samadhi, panya, wisdom. And when he spoke about it in more, you could say, existential terms, or the way he would translate those, the phraseology he would use is the purification of mind. So that's where virtue comes in. And this is so often among Western practitioners something, because not all Western meditators come to meditation, their meditation practice through some formal kind of Buddhist context. They read about it in a book and are just interested in meditation or calming the mind, and then maybe seeing what insight might come from that and that. And it doesn't always, the notion of virtue, morality, following precepts, doesn't always spring to mind, maybe, for people. And it may not even appeal to people very much because it sounds moralistic or something like that. And they have views around the governing of our behavior and so forth in strict terms. And so they shy away from it. But he would talk about sila, virtue, as the purification of mind. So there's something that occurs in the attention to our behavior, to our physical behavior, to our thought, to our mental attitudes, our intentional life. That if we give it attention and care and loving care, even, there is a kind of purification which occurs. And this purification offers the foundation for practice writ large. We can certainly ask, jumping ahead a little bit, we can ask, well, how is it that we can stabilize or concentrate the mind if the mind is not in some manner or way, fashion in a purified state, purified as in clear, That's one of the ways that we would understand purification. Purify water, for instance, it becomes clear. It's not muddied, it's not colored. So the purification of mind is something that one of those things never gets old. Just as it's very difficult to recognize yourself in the midst of an argument or struggling with something which is bringing up, emotions and actually old anxieties, old thoughts, old resentments. It's a very difficult position to be in. And thinking about how it is that we sometimes can act out of these mind streams, these emotional states, it does lead one to a sense of humility. It's so easy to go really far astray, even simply to say something which you regret for days to come, maybe for a long time actually to come, if it involves the severing sometimes of a friendship, or the erosion, the corrosion of some kind of intimate or important relationship. That's, it's very serious business in a human life. So the purification of mind, purification of consciousness, giving ongoing attention to that, loving attention, careful attention, being observant. That doesn't mean kind of deliberate scrutiny and kind of a critical attention over everything that goes into and through the mind, but simply being aware of what is arising in the heart and mind, and letting go of things that don't serve us, being careful. As we would being careful in somehow governing the general atmosphere, environment that a child is living in. Think of it in those terms. We do it because it's of such importance in our life. So purification of mind, this comes about. It doesn't happen once and for all. It can happen once and for all, of course, as Buddhism understands the stages of enlightenment. In fact, one of the things that sets these stages apart is that certain defilements become either purified, or they fall away, or they become, say, in the second stage, they become lessened in some kind of distinctive manner. So purification of the heart and mind. This then gives us this provides this broad and deep foundation for the tranquilization of mind. So this is where we come into understanding samadhi, the tranquilization of mind, where it becomes tranquilizers, of course, have a different connotation through pharmacology, but of course we're not using that. That's not how I use this term, and not how I'm using it either. The stilling, the quieting, this is a form of beautification too, just as purification is. This is a form of beautification. So maybe in terms of water, where purification is removing the cloudiness, the muddiness, the coloredness, and the Buddha, in fact, does use similes around the mind that involve such images. So, say. Experiencing a very desirous or lustful mind is like, it's colored with, but we're seeing everything then through the lens of this color, of this red color, for instance. Tranquilization of mind is like a mind that is bubbling and frothy and disturbed in that kind of way. So purification is clarifying the water. Tranquilization is letting it come to full stillness, seeing into it. And it also its surface reflects what's going on in the mind. So there's this quality to it. So this is where samadhi comes in, and what I remember we talked about this because I remember at the time I was kind of almost anticipating this, but how he described wisdom was experiencing experience. And this is how I bring together Lumpur Sumedho and Lumpur Viradamo in this instance. It's like this: experiencing experience. So there's no separation between what's occurring in the moment. There's no emotional or mental, thoughtful kind of overlay. You're not telling any kind of story. Now I'm sitting watching the breath rising, falling. You don't need to give it words anymore. It's just what it is, and you're exactly there. And you may even see the beginnings of a memory which is unpleasant, but there is space, and that's a crucial for me in this in understanding this teaching. That's a crucial element. There's a space there. And so the way, for instance, Lumpur Viradamo talks about this in the foreground, you might say, in our kind of present environment, or in the foreground, things are happening, we're following things this way and that way. But there is, with the spacious quality, a background. And that's where the presence of mind, simply as it is, or the moment being exactly what it is, that's where this occurs. That's where this spaciousness of experience occurs. And doesn't just occur in some kind of abstract manner, but is felt, is experienced. And I expect all of you have experienced this in your own way. And I can still somehow vaguely recall my very first retreat in Edmonton, and whenever it was, I don't know, Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning sometime, and it may have occurred, well, it certainly occurred when I was walking. I've always loved walking meditation, but I remember it most equally as distinctly when I was sitting. And there was this space, and I was aware exactly in the moment when things were coming to mind, and watching them as they rose and passed away. It's just a very simple and kind of pure moment, experiencing experience. You're not thinking about experience. You're not recollecting it. You're not at that moment anymore needing to apply skill. You're not trying to bring about a moment of lucidity so that you can cultivate loving kindness or some other wholesome factor. You're not needing to remind yourself in any of this, because the foundation is laid, and you've been sitting, watching, and continuing to just allow the moment itself to make its own impression. This creates space. This allows space to emerge, because that's the natural capacity of mind, to be simply present to the moment. So we're not adding anything to mind. You could say what we are doing is reminding mind of itself. And thinking back again for myself, it was literally the first time I had experienced that, or I remembered experiencing that in my life. Maybe it happened once or twice when I was throwing a pot, when I was, in high school or something like that. And I'm sure it had happened before, but I was never aware of it happening in that kind of way, because because of the skill of the teacher and just the environment and various other things, the ground had been prepared. So we look for these things, and they become things that we aspire to and want to get back, and of course they recede from us like very, very shy children, or like the cat who won't jump on your lap when you want it to, but only when it wants to. It happens only when the conditions are just right, and thinking that we can create these conditions is usually the wrong way around. It isn't an approach that's particularly useful. Thinking that we're getting anywhere, thinking that we're trying to produce things, thinking now it's time for me to cultivate mindfulness, cultivate loving kindness, to cultivate this and that. Of course, we use this language, and this is an aspect of practice, the deliberative aspect of practice, the right effort. Of course, these are elements of practice, absolutely. But right effort, you might say. Over time, or with practice, or as we become more familiar with the subtlety of these things, right effort becomes more subtle, becomes more refined naturally. We can't make it more subtle. Oh, I need to make right effort more subtle. No, that doesn't work. Things happen when we get out of the way, and insofar as we can simplify practice. And one way of simplifying practice is simply to remind ourselves, it's like this. Maybe I'll end there with my best wishes.
Sadhu, 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 anumodami. Thank you. Will you entertain some questions, Ajahn Pavaro?
Only if they're entertaining.
Shirley, would you like to moderate?
I most definitely will. Thank you, Jean. Does anyone have a question?
Would you like them to raise their hand or wave
Yeah,
at you?
just raise your hand. It's fine.
I
have a question.
Oh, she's
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
You've got us off the hook now. No
Thank
more.
you, Elizabeth.
It's Susan. Can you hear me?
Susan, you have a question?
I do have a question.
Okay.
It's about senior dukkha. Senior dukkha.
Senior dukkha. Okay, I heard a good quotation. I heard a good one. Do you have more to the question, or do you just want me to talk about seeing your dukkha?
Well, I do have a question.
Okay.
We're living senior dukkha right now.
Okay.
Bill, and it was nice to hear it put that way, because I thought this stage of life probably should be easier. But when it was put the way about the different stages, we're in senior dukkha. So how does one go through it gracefully?
Well, you said senior dukkha, and I thought you said seeing your dukkha. Okay.
No,
okay.
senior, like, there's
yeah. So you don't have abbot
senior.
dukkha or junior monk dukkha, or you don't have a pregnant dukkha. You're not pregnant anymore. You're not, whatever.
We are
dukkha. Sure. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. One thing and I'm sure you do remind yourself, the fact that you have forms of dukkha you didn't have 40 years ago or whatever. Sometimes that's useful to remind yourself of, boy, I'm sure glad I don't go through those things again. Or we do forget sometimes to acknowledge things that we've actually learned in life, forms of wisdom and grace that we bring to life that we could never have contemplated 10 years ago, but certainly 40 years ago, or what have you. So that's one thing, just about recognizing where we are. I heard a good little teaching the other day. It came from some Tibetan teacher. I mean, this is passed on to me, whatever, fourth hand by another monk. But this Tibetan, it's another simple teaching. You know how I like simple teachings. And he said, to really understand dukkha, you need a happy mind. It takes a happy mind to really understand dukkha. So what would we make of that? Don't make don't make more than you need to out of it. Don't complicate it, for sure. And mindfulness is the sort of simplicity of mindfulness that I keep coming back to. Not just because I can't think of anything else to say, but because this is where my life seems to. I particularly love and resonate with the simplest forms of practice, the most modest approaches. There's a kind of humility that maybe comes to seniors, Susan and Bill. And where we recognize that we aren't fully in control of these bodies of ours or whatever, but mindfulness and coming to a teaching of Luang Por Chah's that he never tired of reminding people of is patience, patient endurance, because of course aging bodies tend to be less reliable in various ways, more painful in certain ways, things of that nature. And even if they aren't right now, we have a sense that unless we're hit by a car or die in some sort of sudden way, that there will be some kind of decline ahead for us, and that decline will likely be infused with some degree or another, perhaps a very severe degree of discomfort, pain, maybe confusion in that. And it's more than faith that tells me that our ability to be present to what is, to remind ourselves it's like this, when we apply that to whatever is occurring as the body ages in this way or becomes perhaps more and more problematic in these ways, the value of this just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. It's sustaining. It's a kind of teaching that will sustain us. So, I mentioned having listened to some Dhamma talks. One was from Ajahn Yanako in Abhayagiri, and a very long-standing lay supporter of theirs, practitioner. I remember when I spent a year there, she was there, and that was 12 years ago or something. Named Metika, and she had just passed away. And Luang Por Pisano had gone and sat with her. And sometimes the monks will go and they'll spend, they'll sit for hours and hours and hours, sometimes days at the bedside. And one of the things, and coming from Luang Por Pisano, because he's seen a lot in his life. He's actually sat with a man on death row before he was executed. This is at San Quentin, I guess. And he's been present at some very deep moments in people's lives. So for him to say, it was impressive to watch this woman. She wasn't complaining. She's obviously in discomfort at times. she wasn't wanting to be distracted. She wasn't sort of needy in any particular way. And, for instance, she didn't ask for her favorite music. And so something had become very simple about her attention and what it is that she needed to attend to. And he found that impressive. And as I say, having a report from Lumpur Prasanna, my preceptor, that was in itself impressive. So I think my takeaway from that basically is that nothing surpasses the value of our training in attention. We often want, and I know you're not. I know you know these kinds of things well enough, Susan. But it's so valuable to remind ourselves, and then to remind each other, and to remind and to hear it reminded by our friends that mindfulness, sati, a loving, patient quality to the attention is of ongoing value, and it will not let us down. I really believe this. But it is a training. That's why we tell ourselves, it's like this. It's not otherwise. If I had a choice, boy, wouldn't it be nice if it was? But no, isn't this interesting? Because this is the nature of this moment, and having a kind of openness, and this is a spaciousness. This is what I was talking about. This spacious quality of attention. Attention, there's this background quality to it. It's always present, and we're in the background observing what's coming through the frame of attention. The attention has dilated to such an extent that there's a spacious quality to it, and the pains and discomforts and potential fears and confusions and whatnot are muted, and I don't mean are made less apparent, not at all, but there is space now that gives us this kind of gracious quality, ability to observe what's occurring. And we need to be patient with ourselves too, because it isn't always like that. But I would say that I'm thinking. I imagine everybody on this call can recall times when you were sick about something and you don't know what you're sick from, or you were in hospital. And I've spent a bit of time in hospital myself, and just speaking for myself for a moment. I guess having given myself to this practice for some time, and I'm not alone in this. I'm looking around at people who have done this for a long time, some of you, and it has an energy, it has a power, and that can be surprising. That is to say, when you really need it, these things come to your aid. These things are resources, and it isn't always the fact that you've got to jumpstart the whole thing and start the engine and put the gas in, and whatever model you want to apply, but in the same way that if we're of an irritable temperament, I mean, it doesn't take much, and it just kicks in, doesn't it? Oh, we're angry about this, or we're needy or desirous, or we're impatient with this and that and the next thing. I mean, mind goes in the way that it's trained, and really giving the heart to this kind of training, it absolutely pays. It pays. It pays with a good amount of interest. That's such a that's such such an inelegant metaphor. Anyway.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, would you like to pose your question now?
Another way of putting this, in a way I often think, this practice has an agency, okay? It has an agency, and another way of thinking about kind of framing this whole notion of space and how it emerges and so forth. That's the kind of the true agency of mindfulness, or you could say that's the nature of mind in a clearer state. This is just its character, its nature, and if we allow it, if our practice is, if there's enough kind of humility and love and willingness to continue, and modest kind of discipline and faith and all of these things in our practice, this is the kind of agency which is developing. We're nourishing these skills, these powers, what have you, and that's what begins to come to our aid, I think. So as we age, or as we begin to, I'm sure sometimes what occurs in the midst of some forms of illness, and that they can overtake us, and it can be, I'm sure, quite frightening, disturbing in various ways. But I do think that if we have come again and again and again and again, because it's just, we're just developing wholesome habits in our, what we call our practice. And if we return to it in this way again and again, that agency will once again begin to speak in the midst of whatever is occurring. I do myself, I think we have good reason to have some confidence, some genuine confidence and trust in the character, the benevolence of some feature of mind, the true character of mind, its nature.
Does anyone else have a question? Carol, would you like to pose your question?
Sure. So I think what I'm hearing you say is like from the background and the foreground, but the skillful way of working with Dhamma, I guess, is to experience awareness of the foreground from the perspective of the background. Is that correct?
Yeah, the foreground is just what's happening, thoughts coming and going, sensory impressions, you hear something, what have you. And we all know what it's like to be habituated to be involved with whatever's happening. A thought comes up and you worry about it, or you take it further. It's a confusion, and you get, as I say, you get a little more confused.
But if you can keep yourself in the background while all this is happening.
Yeah, so some sort of simple way of approaching this, and as I say, because I've become kind of a little practice in this just by repetition, just reminding yourself, it's like this, okay. In other words, okay, it's okay, dear. Just don't get involved, though. None of your business. But very good that you notice that, that sort of thing. So taking an attitude like this, and the quality of that response is going to vary. I mean, if all of a sudden you're flushed with rage about what someone has said to you, or if you're utterly delighted by your absolute favorite piece of music coming up unbidden on the radio. I mean, these are different responses and are, quite powerful maybe, and it can take a moment. But we have our preferences, and so we'll get involved with that music, and maybe it'll lead us to begin humming that piece of Bach or John Denver or whatever for the rest of the afternoon. So we get carried away, we get carried away by the way where the mind takes us. Different of us. Personally, we have different temperaments. So for some of us, irritation, anger, impatience, resentment, those are and kind of critical thinking, wondering, what was wrong? What exactly was wrong with what she said? What should I have done? Where did I go wrong? And rehashing things. Yeah, that's the way many of our minds will go, especially if we have a kind of a temperament that's well practiced in that arena. Some of us, we're always looking for something which is kind of comfortable and delightful, and we turn away from things that make us feel unhappy. But we turn to, I'll put in a piece of music on. I know, well, so we're looking to distract ourselves in some sort of way and make our surroundings pleasant and keep things, on a really just in a nice sort of way. And I need more flowers. And I'm not saying any of these things are bad, yeah, but the mind is always trying to fill itself with things that are delightful. And we have our preferences too. I didn't mean to bring lilies. I always, I like freesias better than lilies. Okay, well, whatever, but next time I'm going to get them myself because I like them better, And yes, I like Bach, but I'm not so fond of her interpretation of that sonata, that sonata or something, so preferences can get very fussy too. But in various ways, we get involved in these things. Okay, so we're very much in the foreground. I know it's a simple sort of thing that's occurring here.
But can't you look at it from taking refuge in the background? And
Yes. I would say that any way that you can find to find yourself back in the background is going to work. So, you could say a story. For me, I've just been saying, okay, it's like this. That's a way of, or you can it's just a reminder. Okay, where's my breath? Or, where are the soles of my feet, or something like that. Just some simple reminder that brings you into the present, and that will develop a little bit of space.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with a question?
There she is. Got her hand up.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Can you unmute yourself, dear? In the lower left-hand corner of your screen, if you just sort of click on the bottom, you might find that there is a little microphone there with and just click on that, and very often it'll unmute you.
Is that unmuted?
Yep. Congratulations. You did it. Yay.
It's not my iPad. I don't have one.
That's all right.
Ajahn Pavaro, thank you very much for your talk. With the observer, when you do get that space, for example, and there's and you can non-involve and you can accept, there's a tension there with it is a passive position. It's a very passive position because you're accepting, you've got that space, that distance, you're happy in your stillness, but that's really pretty passive. So you're not really generating, well, if I say action, there are times when you need to make decisions, to act, to whatever. But if you're continually stepping back, the dynamic nature of decision-making or action is really muted too. comment.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, and it's quite true because we need to respond to things, don't we? We need to take action. Somebody asks us a question.
Not just go with the flow, because people think that's what Buddhism is a lot, you know, go with the flow. And it's more than that, isn't it?
Sure it is, yeah. But what I'm suggesting, I guess, what we're suggesting is that training in this kind of way, and because the mind needs to be reminded, yeah. Oh, here it is. Oh, here it is. It's like this. Now, when you need to respond to something, the fact that you've been receptive to what's occurring. In other words, somebody asks you a question. Elizabeth asks me a question, and so you hope that there's a kind of openness, a receptiveness to the moment of your asking this woman in Australia in a little rectangle on my screen asking me this question. So there's an openness to what's occurring, and then it's up to me to respond, isn't it? And I can't respond out of a passive state. When I was talking about it earlier, what I think maybe, and you can consider this and see if it works for you, because we are after all using language and trying to apply it to actually very subtle elements of experience. But pure passivity, I don't know that that's what's occurring precisely. Rather, for me, there is a kind of a very precise kind of balance. There is an activity, and that is the activity of alertness, and being alert is not a passive thing, but it is very subtle. You could say we're being alert to the present. You could say it's being alert to the present, and so receptive and so passive, I guess. But somehow at the very nub of that, there is an alert present for that spaciousness. Good, she found her mute button. Well done. For that presence to be there, not to be absent, but to be present. There is an alert quality, which is a very subtle kind of activity. I don't know if that's making sense to you, but that's the way I'm responding here. But even if that were not the case, even if you wish to describe she's got a bad cough there. Even if you wish to describe the meditative state in the way I've described it as purely passive, I think we could still say, though, that it is generating a kind of agency, which is then becomes of use, of very deep and important use, when we need to be, as you say, active, when we need to respond in some kind of dynamic way, verbally or however it is. I hope that distinction makes sense.
Does anyone else have a question? Perhaps Elizabeth may have a second one, but right now, does anyone else have a question?
It's nice to see you, Sheila. I haven't seen you for quite a while. Hope you're well.
Connie, would you like? Oh,
no, go ahead.
Sheila, do you have a question?
No, she was just looking like Sheila, but as I said, I hadn't seen her for quite a while.
Okay,
So,
Connie, you have a question?
Yeah. I was just mulling over. I love the expression experiencing the experience, and it's. I find that sometimes it is so subtle that I don't even know it, and then once I know it, it's gone. and then there's the desire to try and find it. And so it's like grasping and all those things. But I don't know if I'm playing with cement or like, but just even that grasping, is that part of the experience? Like experiencing the experiences, whatever experience that you are experiencing at the moment?
Yeah, sure. If the moment that it has arisen is if it's irritation or impatience or confusion, if we're really clear about it, that's the experience. It'll change, of course, and as I maybe keep return to more than I need to, it's going to change. But the fact that you've noticed it is drawing you closer to the spaciousness of experience, of experiencing that. But it's very subtle. It comes and goes, and as I say, it's as subtle as one of the cats you want on your lap. Darn, I just can't get my, kind of get your vibes going, and she just won't. She's just not interested right now. And that's okay. That's part of the patience of practice and our capacity to continue, because that's what practice looks like. But you're quite right. I mean, as soon as something goes that we want, or as soon as something is present and we notice desire, oh, I like that. Well, you just replaced what was happening with your desire. So that's why you don't have it anymore. So it's quite simple, isn't it? You just the moment's changed.
Elizabeth, did you have another question to follow up?
I'd just like to say, I'm so glad I'm allergic to cats.
Yeah.
I'm just being mindful of the time here for Ajahn.
Yeah, I'm fine. That usually means that they go to you first.
I know, it's true. It's true.
Oh, yeah, they are. There's a kind of predictability to their ways, their little ways.
Mm. Thank you again. Thank you. You going? You mentioned you might go to Thailand in January. Is that a possibility now?
Possible, yeah, sort of maybe for a month or so in the latter part. Lumpur Dhamma will be away for a couple of months actually, to Southeast Asia, and he'll return around mid-January. So if I do go, it would be after he gets back. Yeah.
That's a nice time to go, though. It'd be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's pretty cool here. So.
Ajahn, would you be
Yes,
coming
do
down
that.
to Melbourne during
Oh,
your?
I'm afraid my travels. I do have to. No, I hadn't thought of Melbourne. Although I do think of Melbourne, of course. Chinta and I sometimes exchange emails, which is always pleasant. But no, I hadn't certainly thought of extending it to Australia this time. Thank you.
All right, maybe next time then, Ajahn.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question?
Okay, well, maybe that's a good time to end this evening then. Thank you. I think we could maybe chant a concluding chant, blessings of sharing and aspiration, maybe, or
Just going to go to
too many options here, isn't there? There we go. First one, 30, you're just about there. 33,
32.
33 would be the English, I think.
Forgive me here.
There we go. That's the one. Okay. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless through the goodness that arises from my practice. And through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind until I realize Nibbana. In every kind of birth, may I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge and surpasses the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled.